Namaste. Welcome to week 2 of How to Channel Your Book in 90 Days. So I like to begin with a moment of sacred space. So we're going to just take a few deep breaths, evoking, embodying the higher self, specifically the quality of being a messenger, being a servant to our higher selves, the highest source that we can access. So I'm going to invite you to, with your hands on your heart, tap into that source energy where your intuition comes from, where there's voices or pictures or smells or sounds or clairgnosis, just opening a channel for your full expression. 2 more breaths. Namaste. So this recording is actually about, week 2, we're creating our outlines. And in order to do that, we need to learn about genre. I'm going to take you on a kind of a virtual bookstore experience. I'll be sharing about the 5 sexy muses and also a formula, a very practical formula for how to create your outline, and some important tips on how to divorce your inner critic, and followed by our homework for the week. So I'll acknowledge that we just met our community in our last call, and then we've been doing all this creative brainstorming, and hopefully you've connected with your accountability buddy and you really checked in around, on a scale of 1 to 10, how's your progress? And I encourage us, because it's real easy to be, oh, I gave myself a 3 because this and that happened. Huge encouragement on looking at what we did accomplish, to focus on the positive, because what we focus on expands. And also when we're spending time with our accountability buddy, not to go into the story of I didn't do it because, and we go into the resistance, like just cut that and focus on what we can do. So I want to say that up front, because we're setting a culture, we're creating, a way of being together. And the other piece is in this moment, in this kind of precipice before we dive into outlining the book, I want to ask you if you're committed to channeling your book in the shortest amount of time possible. And when I say that, it's because a lot of people have this training, this belief, this experience that quality takes time, that we have to really take our time to be, higher caliber. And some people just really don't want to rush, their work. And I want to acknowledge there's lots of different styles, lots of different writers, and that some people on the course may be like, yeah, I signed up for this book, this course, but realistically, I don't really want to finish my manuscript in 90 days. And that's okay. But I want you to be honest with yourself as you do it, because I've had people audit the course, and that's beautiful. You'll still get a lot out of it. You'll still write a lot, but you may not be on the same track of really wanting to finish a manuscript. So to be clear, when I promise that you can write your book in 90 days, I'm going off of, I've had various different teachers and trainings, and there's a book called No Plot, No Problem. And it's a book modeled after this entire movement of how to write your book in 30 days. So it's this NaNoWriMo, which you may have heard of, National Write a Book in a month. And it used to be the month of November, and it's changed. But what they said a book is, they defined a book as 50,000 words. And so anything smaller is more of a booklet. And you can write 50,000 words, a manuscript, a book, during 90 days if you put 10 hours in. if you want to write a, you know, 75,000 word book or a 200,000 word book, which are all realistic, you know, sizes, then you may want to put in more time than just 10 hours a week. But what I'm actually promising is, you know, depending on your book size, by the way, depends on your genre, which is about what we're about to go into. But the key thing before we go into the content is that you get in your body like, yes, I want to write this book in the shortest amount of time possible. Or, you know, okay, I'm going to see what I can do, you know, and I'm going to say no. So it's a yes or no kind of commitment. You know, are you in, are you out for the course in this way? Because we're now going into a formula. And a lot of people who are like, well, I'm going to do it my way, fine, but you may not, you know, produce a book in 90 days. So having made that commitment, let's talk a little bit about genre. So actually, the way that I tell people to find out about genre is to go to a bookstore and look on books. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about you know, what category. Basically, a genre is a category, and it's there's different rules for different kinds of categories. So you know, at the professional level, an agent wouldn't touch a book from an author who doesn't know what their genre is. That's like a real amateur move. And I have to admit, like, I can tell you that my first book, Don't Drink the Punch, I was like, oh, I'm going to transcend genres. Like, I don't need a genre, like, because I just felt like it's part self-help and it's part memoir and it's part this and that and adventure story and mystery. And, and it was fucking messy. So that's a disaster. It's a very challenging way to, like somebody's reading it and the reader doesn't even know what they're reading. And by the way, it's a great book. It's just messy. So when I figured out my genre, then the rubber started hitting the road. So like messing with the genre is a formula, kind of like a rom-com movie. You have certain expectations that are different than a horror. And when you break the contract with the with the viewer, the audience gets pissed. So, but these are deep, old, ancient artistic rules. You know, Aristotle's Poetics, you know, he wrote about how stories are either tragedies or comedies or satires. And this is like aesthetic philosophy. So, you know, you want to know what kind of book you're writing, so you'll then know what rules to play by, or even what rules you might break, but that you know the rules. And the way to do that is often like to go into the stacks. Okay, so I know that there's ways to search online for genres as opposed to going into a physical bookstore, but I'm going to ask you to spend time with physical books. So yes, you can, you know, the assignment is to take a 2-hour chunk of time, 2 hours of your writing homework, and to get intimate with genre. And that may be Amazon research and virtual bookstores, but please do not buy anything, A. B, do not read these books. It's not like a time to get distracted and just read somebody else's book. It's time to actually, you know, get intimate with what books are. So I went to my bookshelf and I felt into, what are the books that are most like the book that I'm writing now? And that practice of, you know, it's like you want to like make yourself some tea, go sit with your stacks and look at, you know, what are the ones, because obviously if you're writing a book, you've probably read similar books and you probably own them. Otherwise, what are you doing writing a book? You know, if it's not the kind of book you like to read, why would you write it? So you want to find books that you actually like and that are on your bookshelves or your friend's bookshelf, or, and then when you do, you say, okay, yeah, this, you know, for example, The Ethical Slut, you go to the back of the book, and I'm turning it around because this one doesn't have it. The first book I picked up kind of breaks the rule I was about to teach you, but usually it's right there in small print. Psychology, Self-Help. This is my favorite book, The Artist Way. My absolute favorite. Like, this is my Bible. And this book is also the most closest to the book that I want to co-author. We want to do the art of relationship mastery. And so they have psychology, self-help. That's very telling. The Ethical Slut is also very similar to stylistically, but doesn't have a genre, but they're self-published, so they can get away with that. And so when I look at, for example, the multi-orgasmic couple, it's sexuality. And, sexuality, this book has, a different style, a different feel. One of the things that I might look at is the table of contents. How, in this genre, how many chapters are there? How many pages per chapter? Because we're going to talk about that in a minute. But, you'll go through your stacks, you'll get a transmission, breathe in the wisdom of these published books that have done well. And that will inform the book that's, on its way, that you're creating. And the genre actually determines for the bookseller where to sell the book, how to categorize it, how to promote it, it establishes so much, but it also establishes for the writer how big, thick size the book should be. Like we know that, novels, although this isn't a novel, this is more like the size of a novel, are usually smaller than this or smaller. And when we see a book like this, we think, oh, it must be how-to, self-help. And yeah, here's another novel. This is by one of my, one of our community friends. And I brought this book from my stacks just to tell those of you who are wanting to write memoirs, how powerful it is to do what Greg Rex did, which is to put as a parable and as a adventure story, to tell your story as, a character. But take your time to learn from the works of others so you can stand on the shoulders of these other books, which are like friends or teachers. And that's how we'll be doing our kind of library research without getting lost in the reading, because you don't want to, it's not about borrowing other people's concepts or borrowing their voice. It's just about matter of big picture. How did they outline? How did they do it? Because we're going to take from them, okay, what size book do I want to create? How many pages do I envision? And there's different rules, because if it's a youth book, it's often under 100 pages. If it's a, best-selling novel, it's going to be under, you never see a best-selling novel for over 500 pages, but you do see self-help or psychology books that are larger. So you want to look at the size. I don't like thinking of them as competitors as much as thinking of them as inspiration, right? And then, if it's going to be mystery, it has to have mystery. Fiction has a formula, but you're going to decide on the number of pages. And right now it might feel arbitrary, but it's okay, I'm going to target 300 pages. Then formulaically, what you're going to do is you're going to divide it by 10 to get the number of chapters. For our purposes in this group, we're all going to operate off the idea that 10-page chapters are more or less the ideal. And the reason for that is because a professional book has a symmetry to it, has a balance to its beauty. It's like an art piece that has symmetry. And when a book proposal comes in and there's a 3-page chapter and there's a 20-page chapter and it's messy, an editor or an agent would say, I'm not interested. But how do you get this wild brainstorm that you've been doing last week into, these 10-page chapters? And that is a process of, now that you take the number, let me back up. I'm writing a 300-page book. I divide it by 10. How many chapters is that? That's 30. So I now know I have 30 chapters. You might have 15 chapters because you're writing a 150-page book, or you might have 50 because you're doing a 500-page book. But the number of chapters that you have is now your mission to take your wild brainstorm and to group the ideas into the number of chapters that you have. So you're basically taking like all the items, and some of those items, by the way, might be memories or anecdotes or case studies or metaphors, or just a philosophy piece. And what you're going to do for each chapter, so I've got 30 chapters. Is that right? Yes. So I'm going to, seems like a lot of chapters, but I'm going to make a list. First, each chapter has a main point. I kind of determine what are 30 main points out of this big wild brainstorm. And those main points are going to have itemized concepts. And that might be 5 concepts. That might be 10 concepts. And I'll give you one example of one chapter. So in the Art of Relationship Mastery right now, we have a chapter called Future Orientation. And one of those concepts might be time management. Another concept is, I've got the ship metaphor, this navigation system metaphor. And those are, 2. But you might have plot points and dialogue and, other things, and you'd line up the concepts that fit under that chapter. The main point, what it is, the main idea, and then the various concepts under. And so you're basically trying to separate out all your brainstorm into either between 5, but you're going to try to get it as close to 18 concepts per book as possible. Okay, if you have more than 18 points, then you have to break it into 2 chapters. The chapter gets unwieldy. Okay, if you have only 2 concepts, I mentioned navigation, like a ship metaphor, and time management, right? Then what you need to do is generate more concepts in order to come up with 18 concepts in order to support that main point. So this is where the 5 sexy muses come in. We then ask ourselves who, what, when, where, why, and sometimes how. And those muses will help you expand. So, this ship metaphor, I've got 2 points. And I'll go, okay, well, who does this ship metaphor apply to? Why is it necessary to have a smooth sailing ship? Or when does one actually do the navigation in their ship? Or where, do they travel to? And so like the concept is future orientation. You ask yourself, well, whose future? Or, why is it important to make sure that in relationship you have same ideals and you're matching up? You want to kind of ask yourselves more questions to generate, or what's something that someone said that reminds me of it. So the 5 sexy muses will loosen up and help you really start to interrogate and flesh out each chapter, so that you then have 18 points per chapter. So, that's a lot more brainstorming. So it's like taking the brainstorming and some of it's reducing it down. And by the way, you might have like, okay, this doesn't really fit into my book. So you can be putting some of those ideas that you brainstormed into a scrap file. And that's the basic outline structure. So I want to go over the homework for the week, because this is that week when you're starting to really create that outline. And the first thing that you want to do, because we're writing now, is you're going to have a writing journal. In the past, I've asked people to post their journal on Facebook. Right now, I'm asking that you just make sure you have a place where you're tracking your writing, where you're keeping your writing ideas together. So you start that writing journal, 1. 2, you go through the stacks. So this is where you do your own research for at least 2 hours to really kind of get a sense of your genre. 3, you actually make a commitment to a genre, and you make a commitment to the number of pages that you want your book to be. 4, you're going to divide your pages into 10-page chapters, writing out the major topics for each chapter. And by the way, your genre may not be one that titles each chapter. Like, there are some types of books that say chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. That's fine. You don't need a title, but you need a sense of a common topic. And if you're writing fiction, it might be like, ooh, this is the chapter where we meet the the antagonist. Ooh, this is the chapter where they have that fight. This is that chapter where, the main character goes despondent. Like what happens in each chapter is still the major point. And then you can, last homework assignment number 5, outline your book with 18 points per chapter, using the 5 sexy muses. That is the homework. So I'll look forward to seeing your progress and working with you next week on the call. Do you want to unmute, or do you want me to just come back there? I'll come back there.